The Georgia State House has just passed restrictions to voting, and the bill has already immediately been sent to the Senate, where it's likely that they will vote on the legislation this week and of course approve it. This legislation is unfortunately likely to pass, and Stacey Abrams was asked about it during a recent interview with Jake Tapper. Let's hear what she had to say.
Republican state lawmakers in your home state, Georgia, have introduced almost 24 bills to make it more difficult to vote. They are going to end no excuse mail-in voting, which has been there since 2005. They're going to reduce voting on Sundays, ask for stricter ID requirements, take away drop boxes. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer in DC, he called this effort by Georgia Republicans, quote, racist, plain and simple, unquote. Do you agree? And is there any way for Democrats to stop these efforts?
Well, first of all, I do absolutely agree that it's racist. It is a redux of Jim Crow in a suit and tie. We know that the only thing that precipitated these changes, it's not that there was a question of security. In fact, the Secretary of State and the governor went to great pains to assure America that Georgia's elections were secure. And so the only connection that we can find is that more people of color voted, and it changed the outcome of elections in a direction that Republicans do not like.
So what Stacey Abrams said there is absolutely true. There were no examples of any type of widespread voter fraud in states like Georgia. The election, even during the pandemic, ran smoothly. And despite the Trump campaign's efforts to try to find any fraud, they failed to do so. They failed to provide even a shred of evidence to federal judges regarding widespread voter fraud. And so what are Republicans doing now? Well, they're realizing that the only way that they can win in the future is by making it extremely difficult for people who tend to vote Democrat to be able to do so. So just to give you a few more details about what this legislation entails, SB 202, as it's known, would limit drop boxes to the inside of early voting locations during voting hours, making giving food or drinks to a voter a misdemeanor. So if there are insanely long lines and people have been waiting for hours and they get hungry, you're not able to give them any food or water. Allow for unlimited challenges to voter registrations and eligibility, and grant state officials broad rights, including the ability to replace local election officials. It would also shorten the runoff cycle from the current 9 weeks to just 4 weeks, and remove the elected Secretary of State as chair of the state election board. And one other thing, under the proposal, voters would have to request absentee ballots 11 days before an election, rather than the Friday before election day as currently allowed. Cenk.
Yeah, you know who wants to limit voting? People who are sure that they are less popular than the other party. If you were sure that you were more popular, you'd want as many people voting as possible. Look, guys, harbinger of bad things to come here. I've been talking to folks on the ground that talk to Republicans every day for their living, and they do it at the state level as well as the federal level. And the word back is, now Republicans literally don't like the word democracy. So anytime somebody calls America a democracy, they go, no, it's a republic. No, they think they're going to be a permanent minority, and they hate it. The idea of being a minority, that's probably the most scary thing that is in a Republican mind. Why? Because they do projection. So they assume that we are going to be as monstrous to them as they were to the rest of us. And so they're like, no, not democracy, not more people voting. Look, even if you're a Republican, there's no ands, ifs, or buts about this in terms of the Georgia statutes that we're talking about right now. They're all meant to limit voting. They just say it's awesome to limit voting, and we should be in just an off case that there's one voter fraud case in the entire state. We should try to make sure that hundreds of thousands of people don't get to vote. No, that's not a right ratio. Nobody thinks that's a right ratio. Nobody thinks you're doing that because you're really like if you're a Republican voter, they very likely tricked you into thinking that voter fraud was real. I don't think that you guys are all dishonest. Some of you are, no question. Let's get it straight, okay? But a lot of you have no idea. You probably think voter fraud is like rampant. No, it's nearly non-existent. In almost every case, honestly, was a Trump supporter in the last election. So it's a non-existent problem, and the whole point is make sure black people don't vote, make sure young people don't vote, and the people who might vote Democratic. That's the whole point. And you can say, well, that's not racist. We just want to win elections. That's why we're preventing black people from voting. By the way, that's the same exact reason why the South did it before, during the Jim Crow era. Right? Certain people in power wanted to retain their power. That's why they didn't want black people voting. You know what that's called? Racism.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And let me just remind everyone that in the case of Georgia, during the 2020 elections, Trump was whining and crying, arguing that there was election fraud. So Georgia did a hand count, not once, but twice. And they actually ended up finding a few more votes for Biden after they did the hand count, which is hilarious. So there isn't an issue with voter fraud in the state of Georgia or any other place in the country right now. But again, we know why Republicans are doing this. When you're unpopular, when you don't have actual solutions, and the only thing you can do is latch on to culture war talking points, you got to game the system in order to maintain power. And that's what they're trying to do here. Now, Joe Biden was asked about these efforts to disenfranchise voters, not just in Georgia, but in other battleground states. And here's what he had to say about it.
What I'm worried about is how un-American this whole initiative is. It's sick. It's sick. Deciding in some states that you cannot bring water to people standing in line, waiting to vote. Deciding that you're going to end voting at 5 o'clock when working people are just getting off work. Deciding that there will be no absentee ballots under the most rigid circumstances. It's all designed, and I'm going to spend my time doing three things. One, trying to figure out how to pass the legislation passed by the House, number one. Number two, educating the American public. The Republican voters I know find this despicable. Republican voters, the folks outside this White House. I'm not talking about the elected officials. I'm talking about voters. And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. I mean, this is gigantic what they're trying to do. And it cannot be sustained. And do everything in my power, along with my friends in the House and the Senate, to keep that from becoming the law.
I gotta say, the Jim Eagle joke was pretty good. It was pretty good. I liked it. Didn't expect it, Joey B, but I hear you. So I think that he's absolutely right. And what he was referring to there, Cenk, of course, is HR 1. That was the legislation passed in the House in order to reform the election process, get money out of politics, push for public financing of elections. And I do actually believe that he feels passionately about passing that because it has to do with ensuring the Democrats are able to win in the future.
Yeah, I'm gonna shockingly disagree with you on the Jim Eagle joke, and this comes from King of Dad jokes. But that might be a grandpa joke, man. Jim Eagle, interesting. Anyway, all right. Look, one really important point, guys. Remember, these are the same exact Georgia Republican officials who swore up and down that there was no fraud in 2020. I mean, very famously so, opposed Trump, saying, no, we're positive. We triple checked. There was no fraud. Then they turn around, those same exact guys, and go, oh, fraud's such a big problem. We have to pass these laws limiting voting. No, then it's super obvious you're lying. It isn't fraud you're worried about. It's black people voting that you're worried about. Again, that is the definition of racism. And lastly, that whole you can't give food and water to people in line. I mean, what would Jesus do? Is that what he would do? Be like, oh no, don't do it. Hey, don't feed them. Don't feed them. Don't give them water. No. Be merciless to the voters. Why are you in a party that wants to be merciless to the voters?
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that All you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.